After decades of saying no, many people are starting to say yes in my backyard. Hey there, everyone. I'm Jeff, and this is Plain English, where we help you upgrade your English skills with stories about current events and trending topics. Listen to these stories, and you'll get exposure to new words, new ideas, and you'll start thinking in English. In every episode, we start with a story, and then you'll learn about a common English expression. The story today is about high housing costs and what to do about them. There's a battle between two groups in the English-speaking world. They're called the NIMBYs and the YIMBYs. You'll learn about what that means in today's story. In the second half of the episode, I'll show you how to use the English expression out of touch. This is episode number 721, so that means JR has uploaded the full lesson to plainenglish.com/721. Before we start today's story, I'd just like to remind you that the podcast is just one part of how we can help you upgrade your English skills. At plainenglish.com, you can make faster progress with active learning strategies. You can take quizzes, do activities, listen to the fast version of the audio, watch video workshops, practice what you learn, and even join a live call with JR and me. It's all about helping you build your skills to become a better, more confident English speaker. Sound good? Go to plainenglish.com to start your free 14-day trial today. Now, let's jump into today's story. Across the English-speaking world, the cost of housing, whether for rent or to own, has been increasing faster than incomes. That's uncomfortable for middle-class families, but it really squeezes those with lower incomes. They have to spend an ever larger share of their paychecks on rent. They have to live far from their jobs, and or they're forced into overcrowded units. As a result, more government leaders are starting to say, yes, in my backyard. To understand what that means, you should learn two acronyms. The first is NIMBY. It stands for Not in My Backyard. NIMBY is a term attached to people, usually homeowners in wealthy areas, that oppose building new houses and apartments close to where they live. They may not oppose new houses or apartments in theory, they just don't want them anywhere near where they live, not in my backyard. In many places, the local residents have a lot of influence over what and how much can be built in their neighborhoods. And many homeowners, having arrived in a place, want that place to never change. So they use their votes and their influence to block construction of houses and apartments. Now, this is certainly not everyone, but this NIMBY attitude, saying, you can't do this in my backyard, this attitude is common. The other acronym is YIMBY. That's yes in my backyard. People call themselves YIMBYs if they think the best answer to high housing prices is to build more houses. They say yes to new apartments and houses where they live. They embrace change in their neighborhoods, and they think building more homes is an answer to high housing costs. Now, the law in many English-speaking places gives the advantage to the NIMBYs. England, for example, has a green belt that surrounds its towns and cities, including London. New construction is prohibited in the green belt. Now, while that sounds lovely, most of the green belt is just vacant land or farmland. Only a small percentage is green in the sense of nature or preservation. The green belt was created to prevent urban sprawl. But today, it means that everyone is crammed into the existing city limits or relegated to very long commutes. London's population has increased from about 7 to about 9 million people in the last 30 years, but the number of homes has not kept up. Meanwhile, there's a belt of vacant land surrounding the capital that can't be used for new homes. The US and Canada are different. There, local zoning rules put strict limits on building. In cities, that means height. There's a limit on how tall buildings can be. In the towns, it's about space. In many areas, just one single-family house can be on each lot, and most towns require lots to be at least a minimum size. That means, by law, many places have only single-family detached homes with plenty of space in between them. Now, this makes construction of apartments complicated. Developers often have to apply for a variance or a special permit. Whenever someone proposes building taller buildings or apartments, local residents go to public meetings and oppose the building projects. YIMBYs say these restrictive policies create artificial scarcity. They inflate the price of existing homes by limiting how many new homes can be built. And the people who bear the greatest burden are the ones who can least afford it. The people who work in the service sector, delivering packages, serving school lunches, making lattes, and driving buses. But there are some legitimate arguments on the other side too. Residents are concerned about traffic. Building high-rise apartments in an area without adequate parking or highways can lead to delays and pollution. There are concerns about schools too. If a lot of new people move into a town, there will be more kids in school, and schools are a town's biggest expense. Some people argue that the residents of a place should be able to decide how their town looks. Some people want to live in a town with picturesque houses and lots of green space, small country roads, and not much traffic. Is that really so bad? Shouldn't the residents of a town have the right to decide how the land in that town is used? For decades, the NIMBYs pretty much got their way in established towns and cities. But now, the momentum is shifting in favor of the YIMBYs. The UK just got a new government. In the election campaign, the Labour Party was clear about its intention to allow more building around London. It wants to allow building on some of the green belt and has promised to encourage 1.5 million new homes in its first 5 years in power. The US and Canada are much more fragmented since these rules are typically made at the town and city level. But some cities now allow small apartment buildings where only single-family homes were permitted before. Others allow homeowners to put a second, smaller house in their backyards. Some neighborhoods now have height minimums, not maximums, for new construction. Kamala Harris, the American vice president and current candidate for the presidency, has voiced more support for housing construction. In Australia, the state of New South Wales is scrapping many zoning restrictions around public transport stations. In Canada, the province of British Columbia, which includes Vancouver, passed an expansion of the number of units allowed on each city lot. The federal Minister of Housing has made home building and housing affordability a priority. So you might be wondering, I've seen all these pictures of big new houses in the United States. Where are they? Well, often they are on the outskirts of town. These are newer areas that are being built. They're not new homes in existing towns and cities. So for home builders, it's far easier to build a new home farther from the city than to fight existing regulations and get new homes inside an established town or city. Here's an extreme example just to give you an idea of how strange this is. You think of New York City as a city of tall buildings. When I lived there, I lived on 55th Street between 8th and 9th Avenue. This is a 5-minute walk from Columbus Circle at the corner of Central Park. It's a 15-minute walk from Times Square, where I worked. So this is the middle of everything. And my building, and almost every building on my street, was 5 stories high. 5. And it's like that in a lot of Manhattan. People are desperate to move to New York City. Rents are sky high, and yet large parts of the city are full of old, low-rise buildings. And it's not because the landowners don't want to build higher. There are limits on how high the buildings can be, on how many units can be built per square meter of land. Now, New York is a special case, but this basic story is true almost anywhere in the U.S. Local governments put limits on how many units can be built per square meter of land, and these limits mean that if a metro area grows, it has to grow out by taking up more land far from the city center rather than up. Voters, though, they like this kind of zoning. Once someone owns a house in an area, they don't want to let others in, and it contributes to high housing prices in the most productive cities. I liked New York a lot, but ultimately, I didn't love it enough to pay those prices. After 3 years of renting, I moved away again. Out of touch. Out of touch is an expression we use to describe someone who is disconnected from reality in some way. It can mean that a person is unaware of current trends, or it can refer to someone who doesn't understand the reality of a situation. In both cases, the person we're talking about is not fully in sync with what's happening around him or with the experiences of others. To say someone is out of touch is not a compliment. So let's start with the first definition, which is to be unaware of what's going on. We often say someone is out of touch when they don't follow changes in culture, technology, or a group or an activity that they've been part of in the past. So here's a great example. When it comes to social media, I am completely out of touch. I'm just not keeping up. I'm not following the trends. I'm not aware of what's going on. I'm out of touch. Listen, I don't have TikTok. That's how out of touch I am. That's how little I'm following changes in what's popular. Here's another example. When I moved to Chicago in 2003, the owner of the local hockey team didn't allow the home games to be broadcast on television. He would not put his professional North American sports team on television in the third largest city in the country. And his reasoning was he didn't want to give away the product for free when he could charge admission to the games. Now, talk about out of touch. It meant nobody could feel connected to the team, so they weren't motivated to go see them in person. This was just not being aware of how television had changed sports. And that was in 2003. Now, after that owner's son took over the team, the Blackhawks were back on TV and won a championship a few years later. So that's not being aware of trends. Next, out of touch can be used to describe someone who doesn't understand the reality of what others are going through. Or even if they understand it, they're insensitive to it. This is often said about people in positions of power or privilege, like politicians, celebrities, or wealthy people who may not fully grasp or understand the challenges faced by ordinary people. There's a famous example from 1992. The president at the time, George H.W. Bush, was campaigning for a second term, and he went to a trade show for grocery stores. And a newspaper report said that he was amazed at a display of barcode scanners. Now, by that point, barcode scanners had been in use at grocery stores for over a decade. They were part of the weekly routine of anyone who ever went to a grocery or convenience store. And the article depicted the president as out of touch with ordinary Americans' lives. The report was an exaggeration. Even the newspaper admitted that. But the myth stuck, and Bush could never shake the image of being out of touch, of being unaware of how real life is for ordinary people. Hillary Clinton dealt with that during her 2016 campaign. She won a lot of votes. She won more votes than Donald Trump did that year, but she was widely considered to be out of touch. By that point, she had been on the national stage for over 20 years. She and her husband, the former president, had become fantastically wealthy, and people really thought she was out of touch. They thought she was just unaware of what life was like for them. Here's one, and this is a good one. The pandemic hits, and one of the things people used to routinely say in the pandemic was, stay safe. Do you remember that? Stay safe. It meant take care of yourself. Be healthy. Things like that. It was a polite way to end a phone call or a conversation. And one of the ways people stayed safe was by isolating, staying at home, avoiding contact with other people. Well, that was easier for some people than for others. The record producer David Geffen didn't have much trouble maintaining social distance from others. He's the owner of a yacht that has 82 rooms, a staff of over 40 people, and is worth over $500 million. So in March 2020, when fear was spreading through the world, David Geffen posted on Instagram a picture of a sunrise in the Caribbean. He was on his mega yacht, and he said in the caption, "Isolated in the Grenadines, avoiding the virus. I hope everybody is staying safe." Talk about out of touch. Literally, people were living in fear of a mysterious deadly virus. They were afraid to leave their homes, worried about how to get food in their houses, losing their jobs. Never mind. David Geffen sends them cordial greetings from his 82-room yacht and tells them to stay safe. And finally, before we wrap up, out of touch can sometimes mean the opposite of in touch. So if you lose contact with a person or group, you can sometimes say you're out of touch with them. It's more common to say you're not in touch with someone, but I did want you to know that you can sometimes say out of touch when you mean not in contact. All right, that brings us to the end of today's episode. This was number 721. So remember, the full resources are at plainenglish.com/721. Thank you to JR for that. We'll be back on Monday with a new topic. See you then. Listen up. If you speak Spanish, Portuguese, Chinese, German, French, Italian, Japanese, Polish, or Turkish. One of the most frustrating things about listening and reading in a second language is being confused by unfamiliar words or phrases. When you listen to plain English, or when you read the transcript, you probably encounter some words you don't know. When that happens, you have a few options. You can stop the audio, go look up the definition, then return to the episode, find your place, and press play again, but that's exhausting. Or you can just skip it and be confused. That's no fun either. But what if you could see the translation of the word into your language instantly without having to stop the audio, without having to look anything up? Well, you can at plainenglish.com. For each episode, we translate about 100 words and phrases from English to 9 languages: Spanish, Portuguese, Chinese, German, French, Italian, Japanese, Polish, and Turkish. And we highlight those words in blue. All you have to do is hover your mouse over the highlighted word, and you'll see the translation instantly. It works great on mobile too. It really makes listening a lot more satisfying, and it's a great way to expand your vocabulary in English. The best way to see these translations is to sign up for a free 14-day trial at plainenglish.com. During your trial, you can read as many transcripts as you like, all with the translations into your language. So sign up for your free trial today at plainenglish.com.